The office space, we see most of the demand underneath 10,000 square foot. And then if
Yeah.
you look at the comps around the market, you've got a few larger, but
Welcome everyone to the Believe in Your Office podcast. I'm here again with my guest Joe Hill with HLI Partners, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the commercial real estate market, how it relates to office furniture, the growth or contraction of the market. What are some of the trends and what are some things going on? So, for those of you new to the show or what's happening, it's a Believe in Your Office podcast is a podcast dedicated to exploring the evolving world of office culture, teamwork, leadership. Whether you're leading a team, navigating workplace challenges, or trying to create a culture where people thrive, the show is going your go-to resource. Each episode features candid conversations with industry leaders like Joe and I, business professionals, and experts who share their experiences and advice on building productive, collaborative, and inspiring workplaces. All right. So we don't have any sponsors yet except for Boomerang. So it's not like your typical start of a podcast there where we'll go through, 5 more minutes of our sponsorships. But without further ado, Joe, welcome. Thanks for being on the show. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
yes. Well, first of all, congrats for your recent um, partnership or merger takeover of Craig's business.
Thank
Great
you.
force of nature here in the Central Florida market for a long time.
Yeah, great business. They've done a really good job over the last 20 plus years, and they have a great reputation. So it was an easy decision for me, quite honestly.
Yes. Yeah, he made transactions easy for a lot of us for a lot of years. But
Yeah, great to hear.
HLI, we are brokers, developers, owners here in the marketplace, kind of serving the needs of the commercial landlord and tenant, try to play effectively good matchmakers for both. We have a lot of agency or landlord listings for industrial. We work with office tenants. My background, I started off in office tenant rep 25 years ago and morphed over to majority of my business was industrial about 10, 12 years ago. And so we've got obviously a considerable book of business, both on the office tenant rep side and then for the industrial tenant rep and landlord side. But it kind of helps you see the needs and concerns on both sides of the ball, so to speak, for both landlords and tenants. And we've had the ability to sort of translate that into development to take the needs of a lot of clients that couldn't find a home with traditional buildings in the market and pairing that up with land or existing buildings and retrofitting it for their needs.
Oh,
So we
that's
translate that
awesome.
to development.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I know we were talking off recording about, how the market's changed so much and some of the things that have been, evolving over time. And it's pretty interesting to see how, one of the things that we see in the market in Philadelphia and actually in your market in Orlando, or both of our markets now, is you're seeing a lot of people blend not having the need for one huge floor of space in downtown, but maybe blending some smaller spaces, but also taking like an industrial space and before where it would just have like maybe a couple receiving offices, now it's they're actually building it out because when you take the cost of building out inside that industrial box versus the rent that you would pay in a retail space, there's comes some, even though you're putting the money up out front to build out that space inside the box, you're still kind of saving some money over time. I just had some conversations about that recently with some brokers in the market.
Yeah, I think the morph is now destination office. If you look at micro markets as an example, Winter Park, you
Yeah.
see most companies are smaller. They're underneath 10,000 square foot footprints. These are lawyers, doctors, accountants, and every professional services group in between, like our company. But
Hmm.
you've got a very high occupancy rate, probably 3.5 to 4 days a week within that submarket. Very little space has been available till now. Recently, we're starting to see some loosening under 5,000 square foot with some leases
Yeah.
available. But if you go to a market like Lake Mary, where you have millions of square foot up for sublease, not all those leases have turned out for Veritas, Fiserv, a lot of the major companies up there that have been trying to sublease for years.
Hmm.
And that back office call center commoditized office space that doesn't have any destination to it, meaning you can't walk to a Park Avenue or a fully amenitized block behind, has less traction, less demand going forward than buildings that have, fitness centers, cafes, and you see that demand. Mitsubishi just moved to a brand new headquarters in Lake Mary that had, it had been empty really for about 2 years, but had the destination in the sense of brand new, full, it's one of the newer office buildings in the market, had amenities, cafe, fitness center, close to a lot of retail, that type of thing.
Yeah. No, I mean that's all great points. I mean, we could talk about this for a long time. I think one of the things that we talk about often is like what you said, that need to have something that drives your employee to the office, right? Like why would they want to come there? You're coming out of a time where you could work at home, you're fairly productive at home, you know what you're doing, but you're losing so much as well as far as culture and, training of new employees or people coming out of school. They really, if you look at the polls, people who are new to the workplace really want to be in an office because they want to learn from the veterans and they want to learn from, the company on, hey, how do we do these things? It's a little easier to do that than just coming up on Zoom meetings because there's so many things that happen, on a daily basis when you're talking. But at the same time, they also don't want to just drive somewhere because they have to drive somewhere, right? To be
Yeah.
there. So,
The innovation, the collaboration, the creativity all comes from being together at least a few days a week.
yeah.
And the companies that don't need to do that, or they have the back office call center component, they've kind of dialed in a way to do that from home in many cases, which was a big majority of the space in Lake Mary. But in terms of I would call it the newer aged companies that are trying to grow and expand, you've got to be able to train and raise those folks up. But the office space, we see most of the demand underneath 10,000 square foot. And then if
Yeah.
you look at the comps around the market, you've got a few larger, but
Hmm.
you've seen St. Pete Beach,
Hmm.
Tampa have a scourge of activity because frankly, the companies chase the employees and the employees are all moving, to the coast where you've got more amenities. If you look up
Oh
and
yeah.
down St. Pete Beach versus a downtown Orlando that's been decimated by COVID. So we've had our fair share of challenges in the
You also have skilled laborers. I was sitting on the plane on the way home. Obviously, I go back and forth every week. I'll be down tomorrow, but I was sitting on the plane on the way home, and I was talking to a gentleman who actually they build basically on the back of a trailer. They build methane treatment centers.
methadone
I don't.
thing.
Yeah, right. So they'll
Yeah.
so they'll create it to create biofuel, right? But the funny thing is like the Space Coast and is was huge for them because there's so much talent and labor
Yeah.
because of the drive for space out there and the engineers and just the different types of laborers you can get. So a lot of that drives it as well. I agree.
Oh yeah. No, Melbourne has been a real hotbed. And during COVID, a lot of the companies here, their younger employees, 25 to 35,
Mm.
were relocating to Melbourne because you could drive an hour and 15 back to the office as needed,
Yeah.
2 days a week or whatnot. And then you've
Hmm.
got the coast and you've got great
Yeah.
schools and good place to raise a family type of environment.
Right. Right. And it's funny the things. I obviously knowing that it was self-serving, so I'll say with a grain of salt. But during COVID, obviously I was saying that working from home full time would never ever work. Like it just was. You got to have, you know, you got to have outlets. Human beings are social creatures, have outlets. I just didn't see how it would work full time. But there were companies that were like, "Hey, we're full time. I don't think there's ever a need to go back to the office." And there were some companies that were like, "Hey, we're 2 days a week and 3 days from home, or 3 days from home and 2 days in the office," whatever it was, vice versa. That was the conversation, and it's interesting now that even the companies that were like, "Never, ever, ever, we need to go back." like you said, it's they're like three days a week at like the least, right? There's not that many that are not in the office at all. But what's interesting in the real for the real estate of that is that what you had mentioned a few minutes ago is that there are different ways leases are being built at this point, because someone who maybe needed 10,000 feet in the past is now saying, you know what, we can do five because we have people that are Monday, Wednesday shift and Tuesday, Thursday shift, and we can take less space and see how it grows. And then if we have to grow and get more space, we can, but not commit to that fixed cost all up front and be a little bit creative on how they do things. And while still having the same kind of team atmosphere if they can.
Yes, that's 100% the case. And like I said, it's very micro market. You've got pockets of demand based upon where people live, where they want to operate every day. And the suburbs, in certain cases, have s- sometimes surged, like we've seen the Maitland office market surge. It's a very limited amount of Class A space that's fully amenitized. You saw Schwab buy an entire park that has a lake you can walk around. You've got a nature's table type cafe there, fully. It's next to the RDV, and Maitland's a central location for a lot of employees, both from the north and the south, to congregate. So you can capture that northern labor pool. But
Right.
it's popular for a lot of companies for that reason. But it's a very small amount of Class A space remaining, and no real new space has been built. And so we've seen that pocket fill up. I think to a lesser extent, South Park is the big, the most successful park in town, and they've got a predomination of call center space that they're still trying to work through with Marriott building their new headquarters and several other tenants down there cycling through some sublet inventory.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So in, in your professional opinion, would you think so if someone's looking, someone's coming in, I'm sure this is going to be based on what your business is and who you're targeting, but if you're looking for space, what would be the driving factors to consider like a winter garden versus a Lake Mary suggest? I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about what the differences are there, but is there something that you think would be, hey, if you're in this arena, you might want to look for this area, one or the other. What do you think? There's something that kind of drives that thought process, or is it just based on your company culture and what you're thinking in general?
Well, I think Winter Garden's extremely niche, right? You've got
Right.
some medical type businesses out there, and you've got a lot of, like Winter Park, a lot of smaller 4 to 8,000 foot tenants where maybe it's a contractor or somebody that's agricultural based that has less than 30 employees, and they're in 4 to 5, 6,000 square foot, something like that, and can afford to pay. Some of the rents up there along Plant Street are $45, $50 a square foot, no different than Winter
Right.
Park, and very limited amount of inventory there to service the needs.
Hmm.
So what you see a lot more of, for brokers that are, brokering larger blocks of space in the industry categories where you've got call center needs to be able to pull from both the DeLand, Deltona area where the housing is affordable for that category, as well as the South Orlando crowd that comes from Hunters Creek and whatnot. And so if you're going to operate, and Orlando has a pocket of defense out east. So if you're defense related, you're going to be wanting to be next to Nav Air and pull your employees from
Right.
UCF and Research Park area. You want to be in the
Hmm.
Research Park. But if you're a call center, you're going to be either in Maitland or you're going to be down there in South Park. And Millennia obviously has a small pocket. You've got some stuff around SeaWorld, but the demand really above, say, 10,000 square foot, you're going to be focused in probably those two quadrants, unless you're a accounting firm or professional services and need to be downtown Orlando, or you have a specific need why you're going to want to be um, elsewhere.
Great points there. So my next question would be like, is there something specific that your clients are looking for when you're showing them space or locations or areas? Like, is there something that keeps coming up recently that you're like, this is either new or this is something that, is something that's common that I keep hearing, like, this is what they want, like something that would be, something to think about in the new
Yeah,
market.
I think the drumbeat is resounding around location sensitivity for drive times, right? That's why Maitland was so important to have that ability to be not too far to the north where you lose too many people from the south, but you're also close enough to the um, to the north to where they'll drive in.
Yeah.
Orlando drive patterns have shifted a lot, but I mean, north to south is probably 30 minutes during the day, and it's about an hour at peak travel times to get from one end to the other. So the drive time is most important, and then obviously, excuse me, the age, condition, and the amenities in the building are ever more important, right? Because if you're asking your people to come in, you don't want the building to look and feel tired. I think I would say anything that's 15 to 20 years old and older is going to be obsolete quickly.
Yeah.
It's not configured correctly in terms of ceiling height. You need 14-foot clear today in many cases to get people to feel like they're not claustrophobic, and you need a good parking field, and you need amenities, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point from an office furniture standpoint as well. I mean, we have the conversation a lot with our clients saying, "Hey, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years?" And 7 out of 10 times they're going, "Well, we're going to be bigger, right? Or we're not sure. We have this other thing that we're working on that we may." It may grow, so we're not sure if we're going to have to mold and adapt. So when you talk about having a space that's 15 or 20 years old, and maybe it's not attractive, it really is true, right? Because after every 5 years or 10 years, like it kind of evolves. It's like it's no different than your house, right? Like if you're sitting there looking at your bathroom that you redid 15 years ago, all you can remember is, man, I spent so much money on this. It looks, I remember how much I loved it, and now you're going, damn, I got to do it again. It was only 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Or your kitchen or whatever. And you're like, I don't want to do it again, but you kind of have to well, not in your personal life. That's kind of how you feel, right? But in the office environment, what's different is you're attracting employees and you're driving productivity and you're driving, thought provoking conversations. And if you want to create new or get new talent, you're going to have to make sure that you have something like we've been talking about that's going to attract clients or your customers or your employees to want to come in. And I think, you know, keeping that in mind as far as keeping things fresh and clean is something that we're always talking about. And a lot of times, the reason why we ask that question is we say, hey, and I don't know, this may be different for you. Maybe you can touch on it, but we may say if you're thinking that you're going to change in 5 years, let's rethink how we're going to design the office space. Let's rethink the money because let's just say you have a $200,000 budget, let's maybe spend 100 because we can, and then put that aside for 5 years from now to kind of reconfigure, right? And spend the budget in phased type scenarios. And I don't think people like to talk about that in my industry because it's like let's just sell as much as we can. But the reality is you want to sell what's efficient and what can help you like really last the longest and also run the whole race instead of just get out in a sprint. So I don't know if you think about that when you're negotiating lease terms, like is it better to have a 5 or a 7 or a 10? I mean, obviously you guys own property and there's other landlords who are going to say let's do 15, right? But to that point, I locked up a lease for 15 years, and I guarantee you right now if asked my landlord in New Jersey if he thought it was a good deal. He's like, no, it went up. I couldn't even predict how much it's gone up. Do you want to get out? So I think
Yeah.
there's two ways of thinking about it there.
No, you're spot on. I think for us, the market is such that the fight for talent. Thank God, I'm the guy with the 15-year-old bathroom whose daughter looked up this morning and said, "Dad, when are we going to renovate this bathroom?" So my wife's going, honey, it's way overdue." So I
Yeah.
get it.
Meanwhile, you and I are going, we just did it. It's fine.
Yeah. And luckily, my daughter's not an employee, or
Right, right.
but yeah, no, it's all part of the dance to.
You might be the employee in that scenario, actually.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But
Yeah.
yeah, the retrofitting the office space is, that's a landlord problem too, because when these spaces come available every five, not everybody does a 15-year lease,
Yeah.
and then you got to dump all that money in commissions on top of it.
Right.
That's what the industry, I think, ultimately is going to shift to more of a retail type environment where the tenants are pouring more of the cash into the
Hmm.
retrofits, which is why you're seeing more financing programs going for people that want to make the spaces their own flair for their employees.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, we offer that as well. We have a financing program that we do that allows for a first year write off, whereas in the past depreciation, on certain things, with the government it's over 39 years, but there's things that are beneficial too. And I think it's important for people to understand what we were just talking about, that the decisions that you make personally are not always the decisions that you make in a business setting, right? There's some things that you'll do that you probably would think are really, really stupid personally, but when you're doing a business, it's just the cost of doing business. And so I
Yes.
think sometimes people can get caught up on, rates or, specific price points of this doesn't make sense because it's not what the going rate is or you're used to saying, well, I can get on Amazon for this, or I would never do this in my personal life. I think sometimes you have to look at it and say, okay, yes, but in a business setting, you can always make the money to to offset that. Or if you have the mindset of, hey, maybe I'm paying a little bit more, but I can make a little bit more because of the area I'm in or because of what I'm doing, to actually provide a better service to my client base, then it's justifiable. And quite frankly, that's kind of what makes the US economy go around, right? So like if
Yeah.
if no one needed money, banks wouldn't exist, and if banks didn't exist, then we're there's no one spending money, right? And then it's like the whole thing collapses. So you can't get too afraid. I mean, there's all different mentalities, and I'm not trying to say one's right or one's wrong, but I think it's important to be open-minded in those things.
Yeah. Well, I think from our side, one interesting thing that we found looking at office and warehouse, office space was always about down to the security deposit,
Mhm.
securitizing the deal, because we found that Orlando being a back office call center market predominantly, we had a lot of startups. We had a lot of companies that were, new age, and they probably had, champagne taste on a beer budget many times.
Yeah.
They wanted the Google environment on the landlord tab, and they weren't, profitable enough to justify that level of expenditure. And many times we got furniture companies to offset the cost of the additional improvements with some of those maybe higher interest rate loans uh, at the time. And on the warehouse side, it's funny. I mean, we have better credit across the board in warehouse space than we do office in Orlando in many cases, because of the fact that warehouse is and sort of an essential to distribute to the tourists here. And so not all cases, but we have far fewer security deposit conversations with warehouse space because it's in such demand, and there's
Yeah.
not really the same retrofit level, obviously,
Hmm.
to deal with. So if you're a guy and you go belly up and you're in a warehouse space, which I haven't seen as much of as I did in office, you know, we're able to backfill your space very quickly, especially on the smaller end of the spectrum size wise. So
Yeah.
it's a definitely for furniture and for build outs, financing is a huge piece of it,
Yeah.
especially for newer companies.
Well, it isn't any part of it. I'm interested to see what happens with, I think everyone's pretty much in consensus that the Fed's going to cut rates in the next week or two, and I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in our market, right? As far as not the regional market, but in the real estate slash, you know, like leasing, are people going to feel more comfortable just because someone said we're going to cut it a 1/4%, or is it going to be slower? I don't know about you, but we're seeing, and we're kind of behind you guys, right? Obviously, when you're leasing things, but we're seeing things just taking a really long time. Everyone's
Yeah.
doing something, but sometimes there's just nothing getting done. Like that's the worst feeling. Like, I'm so busy, and it's like, well, when is this lease going to sign? Like, what's happening? This is crazy. Like, we hear it's like, hey, your furniture plan's great. It's plugged in. It's perfect. We're doing it. We're going to get it done. We're just waiting for the lease to get signed. I go, it's been 3 weeks. Yeah, I know. But it's on their desk, and that's all you hear. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, leases take anywhere from 2 to 3 months to
Hmm.
between back and forth between the parties. If you're lucky in office space, like I said, you always get down to the lease and they go, let me see the financials. They go, oh, what's the tenant improvement dollars, right? And then they get a space plan in tow, and then they go get it priced. and then they make a bunch of changes, and then they add the furniture budget in there, and the tenant goes, "Okay, what's my tab now to move, stroke a check the furniture, oh,
Mhm.
and the overage on the TI budget." Well, the landlord, he's got to pay for that, and the
Mhm.
landlord's going, "I got a 5-year lease term. What do you want me to do?"
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be another, and your financials are not the greatest, so we don't really have a lot of room here to make that kind of a move. And so that's generally speaking what I dealt with over and over and over again on the tenant side in office space. And I think you're seeing right now, home building is somewhat flat in our market right
Mhm.
now. The new starts are not way up. And when we see the rates get cut, you'll have home building return. And that is a huge driver for both warehouse and office space in our market because so many businesses thrive and survive if it's not directly related to home building. I mean, home builders have always chewed up a pretty good percentage of space in our market uh, on both sides. But then all the businesses that serve from anything professional services, attorneys, accountants, to
Mhm.
anything in between. When that business gets pulling,
Yeah.
everything starts about the when those rates start to drop, people start to move in the housing market. That creates those drivers that force people to take action.
No, and it's a great point. I think, obviously people drive, the population drives the businesses. I mean, we had the conversation all along. I mean, Philadelphia was really slow to come back to work, and Philadelphia itself, I'm sure people can from the outside looking in without living here, like, oh, what's going on there? But really, with the new mayor, new initiatives bring people back into the city, working, and population sort of kind of eases crime. People are there doing things. That's like the first step, and then, the biggest thing is when you're not in the office, who's using the dry cleaner, the guy who's shining shoes, the food cart on the end of the street, the parking garages, the tax revenue from the bridges. There's all these things that support, and it's really important. So it's not even about like just like, do I want to stay home or not go somewhere? It's like this, all of this is like kind of a entire whole group, responsibility, because if everyone's not supporting it, then it's not gonna work. And I think we've seen it come back in Philadelphia specifically because people are back doing things and spending money. I mean, look at it, like you and I may go to lunch, and then there might be a happy hour for another meeting with some clients or some vendors or something, and then we go home. But the younger people may say, hey, we'll come out to the happy hour, and then they extend that time. So now the restaurants are like working from 11 to 11 again, and there's a buzz, and there's all the stuff that supports the economy. So like you said, it's all connected, not only from the rate standpoint, but all connected from a standpoint of being involved and being relevant, like we said before.
And we've seen some larger leases get done here in the last 30 days or so, which
Mhm.
has not happened on the warehouse side in 3 years. We had
Mhm.
Ferguson take, 350,000 square foot. We've had LKQ take 250. Ryder took 1,200,000 down in Apopka. And so we're starting to see some CapEx spending, which has not occurred in 3 years. Now, it's not widespread. There's still a lot of uncertainty. Home building is still flat, but those little
Right.
bubbles send some signals out because the recovery happens slowly and then all at once. And it's like no speculative space has been built on either side for office or industrial in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And we have a limited amount of Class A vacancy in the right sizes and the right locations. And so when that gets gobbled up, it very quickly turns into a feeding frenzy where the users say, "Hey, we need space right now. We need it immediately," and there's nothing available. And so, from the office furniture standpoint, it's very clear to see the spaces that get taken off the market the fastest are the ones that have the ready to go scenarios, wired, cabled, they're freshened up. Paint carpet is fairly new within the last couple of years, and it's a desirable space to be. And that's the catch 22 because you do a sublease deal with somebody, and I did it two or three, uh, you know, it seemed to happen more often than not. Somebody takes the shiny sublease where they have no control towards the end of their sub landlord's lease term, and you wind up being held captive by the landlord who leases out either a bigger block of space to someone else. So, but the
Yeah.
furniture plays a huge role in somebody making a pick to take less control and moving into a sublease at a cheaper rate that's ready to move into.
No, great points. And I think that's a good transition into thanking you for your time. And I think that we had some really good points and some really good topics there for the market as a whole. And I appreciate your expertise in the conversation. And just remind everyone, Joe, real quick again, how they can get a hold of you if they're looking for space or trying to lease space or anything that they may need from a real estate perspective.
Sure. We'll put our contact information below on the podcast, my cell phone and email for you guys, 407-718-3096 on the cell. And we'll have our email up so Josh can put that there below in the link. And appreciate everybody's time. And Josh, thanks. Glad to see you're doing well, and wish you all the best. And we'll send you some clients here that need space or furniture.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. And thanks everyone for listening, and make some noise quietly.
You've been listening to Boom Podcast, proudly brought to you by Boomerang Office Furniture. If you're looking to upgrade your workspace with ergonomic chairs, sleek desks, or smart office solutions, we invite you to explore our full range at boomerangofficefurniture.com. Thanks for listening. Be sure to catch our next episode. Until then, stay inspired, stay productive.